The morning sun was already heating up the pavement when David pulled into the parking lot of Premier Motors. He'd been up since 5 that morning, too excited to sleep. After months of negotiations, paperwork, and phone calls with lawyers, today was finally the day he'd see his new acquisition in person as its owner. Well, almost. The official announcement wasn't scheduled until Monday morning. Right now on this Saturday, nobody at the dealership knew who he was. David had specifically planned it this way. He wanted to see how the place really operated when the boss wasn't around. He wanted to walk through as an ordinary person and get a feel for the culture, the staff, and how customers were actually treated. David stepped out of his Honda and stretched. He'd chosen to dress casually on purpose: jeans, a comfortable polo shirt, and sneakers. Nothing fancy. He looked like any other guy who might be shopping for a car on the weekend. As he walked toward the gleaming glass entrance, he couldn't help but smile. This was it. His fourth business, and by far the biggest investment he'd ever made. The showroom was impressive. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, making the luxury vehicles sparkle like jewels. A red sports car sat on a rotating platform in the center. Leather couches lined the walls. Everything screamed success and sophistication. David wandered slowly between the cars, running his hand along the smooth hood of a silver sedan. The place was quiet. A couple browsed near the back. 2 salespeople chatted by the coffee station. Nobody approached him right away, which was fine. He was content to look around. He made his way toward a sleek black Mercedes in the corner. Beautiful machine. He crouched down to examine the rims, genuinely impressed by the attention to detail. This was exactly the kind of quality inventory he'd hoped for when he decided to buy the dealership. "Can I help you find something?" The voice came from behind him. David stood up and turned around, meeting the eyes of a man in his 40s wearing a crisp white shirt and a name tag that read, Derek Mitchell, sales manager. "Just looking around," David said with a friendly smile. "Beautiful cars you've got here." Derek's eyes swept over David from head to toe. The welcoming smile on his face seemed to freeze in place, becoming something stiffer, less genuine. "Are you looking for someone in particular?" Derek asked. His tone had shifted, becoming more formal, almost suspicious. "No, just checking out the inventory," David replied, slightly puzzled by the odd energy. "I'm actually interested in the dealership itself." Derek's eyebrows went up. "The dealership? We don't do service appointments on Saturdays. The service department is actually around back through that side entrance." He gestured toward a door on the far wall. David shook his head. "No, I'm not here for service. I'm interested in the business." There was a long pause. Derek crossed his arms, his body language shifting into something defensive. "Listen, friend," Derek said, his voice dropping to a lower register. "I appreciate your interest, but this is a high-end dealership. Our vehicles start at around $60,000. If you're looking for something more affordable, there's a quality used car lot about 3 miles down the road. They have some really nice options that might be more in your range." David blinked, the words taking a moment to fully register. More in his range? He felt a familiar tightness in his chest, that old feeling he'd hoped he'd left behind as he climbed the ladder of success. "I think you misunderstood me," David said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm not here to buy a car. I have business regarding the dealership itself." Derek's expression hardened. "Mr. Henderson, the owner, isn't available for walk-ins. If you have a business proposal, you can submit it through our website. But I'm going to be honest with you, he's not taking meetings with—" Derek paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Unsolicited visitors." The implication hung in the air like smoke. David felt his jaw tighten, but he maintained his composure. He'd dealt with this kind of thing before, though it never stopped stinging. "I see," David said quietly. "And what makes you think I'm an unsolicited visitor?" Derek uncrossed his arms and took a small step closer, lowering his voice. "Look, I've been in this business for 15 years. I can tell when someone belongs here and when someone doesn't. This is a professional establishment serving a specific clientele. We have standards to maintain." A young saleswoman walking by with a clipboard glanced their way, her expression uncomfortable. She quickly looked down and hurried past. David took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment. He could reveal who he was right now. He could watch Derek's face transform from smug superiority to horror, but something stopped him. He wanted to see exactly how far this would go. He needed to know what was really happening in his dealership when he wasn't in the picture. "Standards," David repeated. Based on what exactly? Derek's face flushed slightly. Based on our customer profile. Look, I don't have time to debate this with you. If you're not here to purchase a vehicle and you don't have an appointment, then I'm going to have to ask you to leave. And if I don't? David heard himself say the words before he'd fully decided to challenge this. Derek's expression shifted from annoyed to aggressive. Then I'll have security escort you out. We have the right to refuse service to anyone. This is private property. David glanced around the showroom. The couple in the back had stopped browsing and were watching. The two salespeople by the coffee station had gone silent. Everyone was staring now. I'm not causing any trouble, David said, raising his hand slightly. I'm just looking at cars. You're making our customers uncomfortable, Derek insisted, though the couple hadn't seemed bothered at all before this confrontation started. And you're wasting my staff's time. For the last time, I'm asking you politely to leave. David felt a strange calm settle over him. This was ugly, but in a way it was clarifying. He'd just learned something crucial about his new business. Something he never would have discovered from spreadsheets or quarterly reports. Fine, David said softly. I'll go. But I'd like to speak with Mr. Henderson about this incident. Derek actually laughed at that, a short, dismissive bark. Mr. Henderson doesn't meet with people who come in off the street making demands. He trusts me to handle these situations, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Now, are you going to walk out, or do I need to make a phone call? David looked at Derek for a long moment, memorizing every detail of this interaction. Then he nodded slowly and turned toward the door. Hey, Derek called after him. His voice had an edge of warning in it. Don't come back here. Next time I won't be so nice. I'll call the police instead of just security. David pushed through the glass doors into the bright morning sunlight. His heart was pounding, his hands trembling slightly with suppressed anger and humiliation. He walked to his car, got in and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. A security guard had appeared near the entrance watching him. Making sure he actually left, David pulled out his phone and dialed his lawyer. She answered on the second ring. Catherine, he said, his voice tight. We need to talk about Monday's meeting. Something just happened that you need to know about. As he drove away from Premier Motors, David looked in the rearview mirror at the dealership growing smaller behind him. In 2 days, he'd be walking back through those doors. But next time, everything would be different. Next time, they'd know exactly who he was. David sat in his home office that Saturday afternoon, still feeling the sting of what had happened. His lawyer, Catherine, was on speakerphone, and he could hear the anger in her voice even through the crackling connection. That's completely unacceptable, she said firmly. David, we can move the meeting up. We can go back there today and straighten this out right now. David leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Part of him wanted exactly that. He wanted to march back into Premier Motors and watch Derek's face crumble when he realized his mistake. But something else was nagging at him. No, David said slowly. Let's keep everything as planned. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, just like we scheduled. Are you sure? After what he did to you? David thought about it. The humiliation was still fresh, burning in his chest. But he'd learned long ago that anger made for poor decisions. He'd built 3 successful businesses by staying calm and thinking strategically. I'm sure, he said. If we change the plan now, Derek gets a warning. Someone might tip him off. I want to see how Monday's meeting goes with everyone thinking it's just a normal staff gathering. I want to see who knew about this kind of behavior and who didn't. Catherine was quiet for a moment. You're not just handling Derek. You're evaluating the entire operation. Exactly. David picked up a pen and started making notes. This wasn't just one bad manager having a bad day. He was comfortable doing what he did. That means it's probably happened before. I need to know if this is the culture of the whole place or just one rotten apple. They talked for another 20 minutes, going over the details of Monday's meeting. Catherine would arrive first, introduce herself as the representative for the new ownership, and then bring David in. Standard procedure for an ownership transfer announcement. After hanging up, David sat in silence. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother Kevin. How'd it go? You finally get to see your new toy? David stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then he typed back, it was educational. Tell you about it tomorrow. The rest of Saturday passed slowly. David tried to distract himself with yard work, then watched a basketball game. But his mind kept drifting back to Derek's face, that look of smug certainty. The casual cruelty of being judged and dismissed based on nothing but appearance. Sunday wasn't much better. David met his brother for lunch at their favorite barbecue spot. The place was crowded and loud, filled with families enjoying the weekend, so what happened? Kevin asked as soon as they sat down. You've been weird since yesterday. David told him the whole story. Kevin's expression went from curious to shocked to furious in the span of 2 minutes. Are you kidding me? Kevin's voice rose enough that people at the next table glanced over. Man, please tell me you fired him on the spot. He doesn't know who I am yet, David said quietly. Nobody does except Catherine and the previous owner. The staff meeting is tomorrow. Kevin shook his head in disbelief. I don't know how you stayed calm. I would have lost it right there. Almost did, David admitted, but that wouldn't have solved anything. Tomorrow is going to be interesting. I wish I could be there to see his face. Kevin laughed, but there was no humor in it. What are you going to do? Fire him in front of everyone? David cut into his brisket thinking about it. I don't know yet. I need to see how he handles the meeting first. How he reacts when he sees me walk in. He's going to pass out, Kevin said. Seriously, man. Document this. I want to hear everything. That night, David barely slept. He kept rehearsing different scenarios in his mind. What would he say? How would Derek respond? Would anyone else speak up? He thought about the young saleswoman who'd hurried past during the confrontation, her face tight with discomfort.
Had she wanted to say something?
Or was she just relieved it wasn't happening to her? Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the promise of rain. David stood in front of his bathroom mirror adjusting his tie. He'd chosen his best suit, charcoal gray with a crisp white shirt. He wanted to look every inch the successful businessman he was. His wife Rita appeared in the doorway holding a cup of coffee. Big day, she said softly. Yeah. David took the coffee gratefully. You know what the crazy thing is? I'm more nervous now than I was when I signed the purchase papers. That's because this is personal. Rita squeezed his shoulder. What happened Saturday wasn't about business. It was about respect. Or the lack of it, David nodded. She was right, as usual. This wasn't just about owning a dealership anymore. It was about changing something broken. The drive to Premier Motors took 20 minutes through morning traffic. David parked in the back lot this time, not wanting anyone to spot him early. Catherine's car was already there, right on time. He sat in his car for a moment watching employees arrive. They looked normal, ordinary people heading to work on a Monday morning. Coffee cups in hand, chatting with each other. Did they know what kind of environment they worked in? Did they participate in it, or were they victims of it too? At 8:55, David's phone buzzed. Catherine, everyone's gathering. Give me 5 minutes to do the introduction. Then come in through the main entrance. I'll text you. David sent back a thumbs up. His heart was racing now. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror one more time, straightened his tie again, and took a deep breath. Inside the dealership, he could imagine the scene. Catherine walking into the conference room, briefcase in hand, professional and composed. The staff settling into chairs, probably wondering what this meeting was about. Derek likely sitting near the front, maybe making jokes about how boring these corporate meetings always were. His phone buzzed again. Catherine, ready when you are. David got out of the car and walked toward the entrance. The same glass doors he'd been escorted through just 2 days ago. The morning air was cool against his face. His shoes clicked on the pavement with each step. He pulled open the door and stepped inside. The showroom looked different on a Monday. More staff around, more energy. A receptionist at the front desk looked up with a professional smile. Good morning. Can I help you? I'm here for the staff meeting, David said calmly. Conference room? She pointed down a hallway. Second door on your left. David nodded his thanks and walked toward the conference room. He could hear Catherine's voice through the door, professional and clear, talking about transitions and new opportunities. He paused just outside, his hand on the door handle. This was it. The moment everything changed. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The conference room fell silent. Every head turned. David's eyes swept across the faces, watching recognition and confusion ripple through the crowd. Some people looked simply curious. A few seemed welcoming. Others appeared worried, though they probably didn't know why yet. And then David's gaze landed on Derek, sitting in the third row. The sales manager was in mid-conversation with another employee, his mouth still open from whatever joke he'd been telling. His eyes met David's, and David watched the exact moment everything clicked into place. Derek's face went from tan to pale in a heartbeat. His mouth snapped shut. The confident posture crumbled. Catherine stepped aside, gesturing toward David with a professional smile. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to David Chen, the new owner of Premier Motors." The silence in the conference room was deafening. David stood at the front, his hands clasped calmly in front of him, watching nearly 30 faces stare back at him. Some looked confused, others curious. A few seemed genuinely pleased, but Derek looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Good morning, everyone," David said, his voice steady and clear. "As Catherine mentioned, my name is David Chen, and as of last Friday, I'm the owner of Premier Motors." A nervous ripple of applause started from a few people in the back. David smiled and held up a hand. "Thank you. I know this is unexpected. Mr. Henderson kept the sale very quiet, which was his choice. But I want to be transparent with all of you from day one. That's why we're having this meeting." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I'm not here to tear everything down. This is a successful dealership with a solid reputation, but I am here to make some changes." He saw Derek shift uncomfortably in his seat, his face still pale. "Before we talk about the future, though, I need to address something that happened this past Saturday." David's tone remained calm, almost conversational, but everyone in the room suddenly sat up straighter. "I came by the dealership to see the operation firsthand. I dressed casually. I didn't announce myself. I wanted to see how things really worked when the boss wasn't around." You could have heard a pin drop. Several staff members exchanged worried glances. I walked around the showroom for a bit, looking at the inventory. Beautiful cars, by the way. Really impressive lineup. David moved slowly across the front of the room as he spoke. Then I was approached by a member of management. I was asked if I needed help, which was professional. But when I expressed interest in the dealership itself, things took a turn. Derek had gone completely still. He looked like a statue, frozen in his chair. I was told that I should try the used car lot down the road, that their inventory might be more in my price range. David let that hang in the air for a moment. I was told that this dealership serves a specific clientele, that there are standards to maintain, and when I didn't immediately leave, security was threatened. Gasps rippled through the room, heads turned, people looking at each other trying to figure out who David was talking about. "Now," David continued, "I could stand here and tell you that this was unacceptable, that it was unprofessional, that it violated every principle of good customer service. But honestly, it was worse than that. It was personal. It was about who someone thought I was based on how I looked, based on assumptions that had nothing to do with my actual business or my actual purpose for being there." A woman in the front row raised her hand tentatively. She was young, maybe late 20s, with her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. David nodded at her. Was this Derek?" Her voice was quiet but clear. David looked at Derek, who seemed to be trying to disappear into his chair. "Derek, would you like to stand up?" For a moment, Derek didn't move. Then slowly, like a man walking to his execution, he rose to his feet. His face was red now, a deep crimson that spread from his collar to his hairline. "Derek, I'm going to give you a chance to explain what happened Saturday, in your own words. Why did you treat me that way?" Derek's mouth opened and closed. He looked around the room as if hoping someone might rescue him. No one moved. His voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I thought I was protecting the dealership." "Protecting it from what?" David asked, his tone still calm. From people who weren't serious buyers. We get people who come in sometimes just to waste time, or to mess with the cars. And I thought, you thought I was one of those people?" "Yes." Derek's voice was barely above a whisper. "Based on what information?" Derek was silent. "Based on my clothes?" David pressed. "Based on the car I drove? Or was it based on something else?" The room was so quiet that David could hear the air conditioning humming through the vents. "I made a mistake," Derek finally said, his voice shaking. "I made an assumption. I shouldn't have." David nodded slowly. "You're right. You made an assumption. But here's what concerns me, Derek. You weren't hesitant about that assumption. You weren't uncertain. You were confident, comfortable, like you'd done this before." Derek's eyes dropped to the floor. "Have you?" David asked directly. "Have you treated other customers this way? Made assumptions about who belongs here and who doesn't based on how they look? The silence stretched on. Then from the back of the room, a voice spoke up. An older man, probably in his 60s, wearing a sales badge. "I've seen it happen," he said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Not often, but yeah. I've seen customers get steered away, discouraged, told we probably don't have what they're looking for before anyone even asks what they want. "Thank you for your honesty," David said to him, then turned back to Derek. "Do you have anything to say to that?" Derek's hands were shaking. "I was trying to be efficient, to not waste people's time if they couldn't afford." "How do you know what people can afford?" David interrupted, his voice taking on an edge for the first time. "Did you run their credit? Did you ask about their budget? Or did you just look at them and decide?" Derek had no answer. David took a breath, reining in his emotion. "Let me tell you something about myself. I grew up in this city. My parents owned a small restaurant downtown. They worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week to put me and my brother through school. I wore secondhand clothes. I drove a beat-up car through college. And I got treated exactly the way you treated me more times than I can count." He could see several people in the room nodding, their eyes sympathetic. "But I put myself through business school. I started my first company when I was 25, then a second one, then a third. I've built a successful career and a good life. And you know what? I still drive a regular car. I still dress casually on weekends. Because that's who I am. The clothes in the car don't define my worth or my capability." David walked back to the front of the room, facing everyone. "Saturday, when I was escorted out of my own dealership, I had a choice to make. I could come in here today, fire Derek on the spot, and move on. Problem solved, right?" Several people shifted uncomfortably. "But that wouldn't actually solve the problem, because the problem isn't just one person. It's a culture. It's a set of assumptions that have been allowed to exist here. And that's on the previous leadership, and now it's on me to fix it." He turned back to Derek. "Derek, I am letting you go. Effective immediately. Not just because of what you did to me, but because of what your actions reveal about how this dealership has been run. You're not going to change overnight, and I can't have you in a leadership position here." Derek nodded, his eyes glistening. He looked like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. "You can collect your things from your office. HR will be in touch about your final paycheck and benefits. I'm sorry it ended this way." Derek walked toward the door, his shoulders slumped. The room watched him go in complete silence. When the door clicked shut behind him, David turned back to face everyone else. "Now," he said, his tone shifting to something warmer, "let's talk about the future of Premier Motors. Because despite what just happened, I'm excited about what we're going to build together. But first, I need to know something. I need to know who else has witnessed this kind of behavior and stayed silent. I'm not going to punish honesty, but I need to understand what I'm working with." Slowly, tentatively, hands began to rise around the room. The hands went up slowly at first. 3, then 5, then nearly half the room. David watched carefully, noting who raised their hands and who didn't. Some people looked relieved to finally acknowledge what they'd seen. Others looked ashamed. "Thank you," David said quietly. "You can put your hands down. I appreciate your honesty." An older woman near the middle spoke up without being called on. "I've been here 11 years. I've seen good people walk out of here feeling small, feeling like they didn't belong. And I hate that I never said anything." Her voice cracked slightly. "I needed this job. I have a family to support, but that's not an excuse." "What's your name?" David asked. "Patricia. I'm in finance." "Patricia, thank you for speaking up. And you're right, needing a job isn't an excuse. But I also understand fear. Fear of losing income, fear of retaliation, fear of being labeled a troublemaker." David looked around the room. "That culture ends today. If you see something wrong happening here, I want to know about it. And there will be no punishment for speaking up. In fact, staying silent is what will get you in trouble going forward." A young guy in the back, couldn't have been more than 25, raised his hand. David nodded at him. "I'm Tony, I work in detailing. I just want to say, I'm glad you're here. Some of us have been uncomfortable for a long time, but nobody listened. I'm listening now," David said, "and we're going to make some changes. Real changes, not just talk." He spent the next hour laying out his vision. He talked about expanding their customer base, reaching out to communities that had been overlooked or dismissed. He discussed training programs for staff on unconscious bias and inclusive customer service. He mentioned partnering with local organizations, offering financial literacy workshops for first-time buyers. "I want this to be a place where everyone feels welcome," David said. "Whether you're buying your first car or your 10th, whether you show up in a suit or in jeans, whether you've got perfect credit or you're working on rebuilding it, this is about respect, about treating people like human beings." The woman from earlier, the one with the ponytail who'd first asked about Derek, raised her hand again. "Yes, I'm Jennifer. I'm in sales, and I just want to say, a lot of us have wanted this kind of change for a long time. We're ready to do better." David smiled at her. "That's good to hear, Jennifer. I'm going to need people like you to help lead this transition. In fact, I'm going to need a new sales manager. That position is now open." The room stirred with interest. Several people sat up straighter. "I'm not going to make that decision today," David continued. "I'm going to spend the next few weeks getting to know all of you, understanding how you work, what your strengths are. The person who gets that role will be someone who shares this vision and has the skills to execute it." After the meeting ended, people didn't rush out. They lingered, coming up to David one by one. Some wanted to introduce themselves properly. Others wanted to share stories, some encouraging, some troubling. David listened to all of them, shaking hands, making mental notes. Patricia from finance waited until almost everyone else had left. "Can I tell you something?" she asked quietly. "Of course. Derek wasn't the only one. There's another manager, Craig, in the service department. He's got the same attitude, maybe worse actually, because he hides it better." David pulled out his phone and made a note. "Tell me more," he makes comments. "Nothing you could report to HR exactly, but you know what I mean. Little things. Jokes about certain neighborhoods. Assumptions about who can and can't pay their bills. A couple of months ago, a woman came in for service, and he told the guys to check her car extra carefully because those people always try to get work done for free." "Those people?" David's jaw tightened. Patricia nodded. "I probably should have said something then. But like I said, I was scared. You're saying something now. That's what matters. I'll deal with Craig." Over the next 2 weeks, David was at the dealership every single day. He worked every department, talked to every employee, and paid attention to every customer interaction. He sat in on sales meetings. He watched how the finance team processed applications. He even spent a day in the service department, which is where he met Craig. Craig was smooth, professional on the surface. He smiled at customers, spoke politely, and seemed competent at his job. But David noticed the small things. The way Craig's demeanor shifted depending on who he was talking to. The subtle differences in how quickly he processed service requests. The coded language he used with his team. David documented everything. Then on a Friday afternoon, he called Craig into his office. "Have a seat," David said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Craig sat down, looking relaxed. "What can I do for you, boss?" "I want to talk about customer service standards in the service department." "Sure. What about them?" David leaned forward. "I've been watching how things operate, and I've noticed some inconsistencies in how customers are treated." Craig's smile didn't falter. "Every customer is different. We adjust our approach based on the situation." "Based on what aspect of the situation?" "Well, you know, some customers know cars, some don't. Some have realistic expectations, some don't. We handle each case individually." "Give me an example," David said. Craig thought for a moment. "Okay, like last week. Lady came in complaining about a noise. We checked it out thoroughly because, women sometimes imagine problems that aren't there. Turned out to be nothing. But we were thorough." David felt his stomach tighten. "Women imagine problems?" "Not all women," Craig backtracked quickly. "But some customers are more mechanically inclined than others. And you determine that based on gender?" Craig shifted in his seat, finally sensing he might be in trouble. "I mean, it's just experience. After doing this for 20 years, you develop instincts." "Instincts," David repeated. "Or biases?" The room went quiet. Craig's smile disappeared. "I've heard some things about you, Craig, the way you talk about certain customers when they're not around. The assumptions you make. The different levels of service people receive based on factors that have nothing to do with their actual needs." "Who told you that?" Craig's tone shifted, becoming defensive. "Because whoever it was, it doesn't matter who told me. What matters is that it's true, and you just confirmed it with your comment about women customers." Craig stood up. "Look, If someone's got a problem with how I do my job, they should come to me directly instead of running to you. Sit down, David said firmly. We're not done. Craig hesitated, then sat back down, his face flushed with anger now. You're good at your job technically, David said. Your department runs efficiently. Cars get fixed. But that's not enough. How you treat people matters just as much as the quality of the work. And you're failing in that area. So what, you're firing me too? Just like Derek? I'm giving you a choice, David said. You can commit to real change. Attend training, work with HR on your communication, be held accountable for how you treat every customer equally. Or you can leave. Your choice. Craig stared at him for a long moment. And if I choose to stay, you'll be watching me like a hawk, waiting for me to mess up. I'll be watching you like a hawk whether you stay or go, David said. But yes, if you stay, you'll be on probation. 6 months. One complaint that I can verify and you're done. Craig stood up again, this time with purpose. I don't need this. I can get a job anywhere. Then I guess we're done here. David stood as well. You can collect your things. HR will process your exit paperwork. After Craig left, slamming the door behind him, David sat back down and rubbed his temples. This was harder than he'd expected. Not the firing itself, but the realization of how deep the problems ran. How many people had been hurt by this culture over the years. His phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer, the saleswoman from the meeting. Just wanted to say thank you. A customer just told me this is the first time she's felt respected at a dealership. We're already seeing the difference. David smiled, feeling some of the tension ease. Change was happening. Slowly, but it was happening. There was a knock on his door. Patricia poked her head in. Got a minute? There's something else I think you should know about. David waved her in. The work wasn't done yet. Not even close. 6 months had passed since that first Monday morning meeting. David stood in the showroom on a Saturday afternoon, watching his team interact with customers. The change was visible. You could feel it in the air, in the way people moved and talked, in the energy of the place. Jennifer had become the new sales manager after proving herself over 3 months of dedicated work. She was currently helping an elderly couple explore their options for a sedan, taking her time, never rushing them, answering every question with patience and respect. Tony from detailing had been promoted to service advisor after showing natural talent for customer relations. Right now he was explaining repair options to a young single mother, breaking down the costs in a way she could understand, offering payment plans without judgment. The dealership looked different too. David had updated the waiting area with comfortable seating, added a children's play corner, and hung artwork from local artists on the walls. The coffee was better. The atmosphere was warmer. It felt less like an intimidating luxury showroom and more like a place where real people conducted business. Mr. Chen, the receptionist called over to him. There's someone here to see you. Says he doesn't have an appointment, but he was hoping you might have a few minutes. David looked toward the entrance and stopped cold. Derek Mitchell stood there looking smaller somehow than he had 6 months ago. He wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt. His hair was a bit longer, less precisely styled. He looked nervous. It's okay, David said to the receptionist. I'll talk to him. He walked over to Derek, who straightened up, his hands fidgeting at his sides. David, Derek said quietly. Thank you for seeing me. I know I have no right to ask for your time. Let's go to my office, David said, gesturing toward the hallway. They walked in silence past the conference room where everything had changed that Monday morning. Derek glanced at it as they passed, and David saw him swallow hard. In the office, David sat behind his desk and gestured for Derek to take the chair across from him. The same chair where Craig had sat before storming out months ago. What can I do for you, Derek? Derek took a breath. I came to apologize. I know I apologized before in the moment, but that wasn't real. That was just me being scared and trying to save my job. This is different. I've had 6 months to think about what I did and why I did it, and I needed to tell you that I'm genuinely sorry. David leaned back in his chair, studying Derek's face. What changed? Everything. Derek's voice was thick with emotion. After I left here, I couldn't find work for 2 months. Word got around about what happened. Other dealerships didn't want to touch me. I had to do some serious soul searching, and I realized I'd been operating on autopilot for years, making assumptions, judging people, thinking I was just being practical or efficient. But really, I was being He paused, struggling with the word. I was being prejudiced. I treated people badly because of how they looked, and I convinced myself it was good business sense. David didn't say anything, letting Derek continue. I started seeing a therapist. My wife actually insisted on it. She said she didn't recognize me anymore. Didn't like who I'd become. We almost separated over it. Derek's eyes were red now. I've been volunteering at a community center in the neighborhood where I grew up, helping people with job applications, resume writing, and I see myself in the kids there. I came from nothing, David. My dad was a mechanic. We struggled. But somewhere along the way, after I got successful, I forgot that. I started judging people the way I used to be judged. Why are you telling me this? David asked gently. Because you deserved better than what I gave you. Because every person I turned away from this dealership deserved better. And because I want you to know that what you did that Monday, firing me in front of everyone, it was the wake-up call I needed. I was angry at first. Really angry. But it was the best thing that could have happened to me. David nodded slowly. I appreciate you coming here and saying this. That took courage. I'm not asking for my job back, Derek said quickly. I know that's not possible, and honestly, I'm in a different place now. I actually started working at a nonprofit that helps people with bad credit get into reliable used cars. It pays a lot less, but it feels right. I just wanted you to know that I heard you. I heard everything you said that day, and I'm trying to be better. They sat in silence for a moment. Then David stood up and extended his hand. Derek stood too, looking surprised, and shook it. I respect what you're doing, David said. Real change is hard. It's easier to stay angry and defensive. The fact that you did the work says something. Thank you, Derek said, his voice barely above a whisper. And thank you for what you're doing here. I drove past a few weeks ago and saw the changes. The new signs, the community events you're hosting. It's good. It's what this place should have been all along. After Derek left, David sat at his desk for a long time thinking. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother Kevin. How's the dealership treating you? Still love being a car guy? David smiled and typed back. It's been quite a journey. Tell you about it at dinner tomorrow. There was a knock on his door. Patricia poked her head in, smiling. Got a second? The numbers from last month just came in. Good news or bad news? Good, really good. Sales are up 32% from this time last year. Customer satisfaction scores are the highest they've ever been. And we're getting reviews online talking about how welcome people feel here. David felt warmth spread through his chest. That's what I wanted to hear. There's more, Patricia said, stepping fully into the office. Remember that financial literacy workshop we started offering? We've had over 200 people attend in the past 3 months, and 15 of them have come back and purchased vehicles from us. But even the ones who didn't buy anything have been leaving incredible feedback about how much the workshop helped them. That's exactly the point, David said. This was never just about selling cars. It's about serving the community. Patricia nodded. A lot of us are really proud to work here now. That's different from 6 months ago. We're not just showing up for a paycheck anymore. We feel like we're part of something meaningful. That evening, as David locked up the dealership, he paused in the parking lot and looked back at the building. The lights were still on in the showroom, illuminating the cars inside. A banner hung across the front window advertising next week's free credit counseling event. His phone rang. It was Rita. Hey, honey. You coming home soon? Yeah, I'm leaving now. It's been a long day. Good day or bad day? David thought about Derek's visit, about Patricia's report, about the young mother he'd seen earlier who drove off the lot in a safe, reliable car with a payment plan she could actually afford. Really good day, he said. I'll tell you about it when I get home. As he drove through the city streets, David thought about that Saturday morning 6 months ago. The humiliation of being judged and dismissed, the anger that had burned in his chest. Part of him would always carry that moment. But it had also given him clarity about what needed to change, not just in his dealership but in how business was done in general. He thought about Derek, doing the hard work of becoming a better person. About Craig, who'd chosen pride over growth and was probably still making the same mistakes somewhere else. About Jennifer and Tony and Patricia and all the others who'd embraced the change and were now thriving because of it. Change wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. There would be more challenges ahead, more difficult conversations, more hard decisions. But it was possible. That was the lesson. When people were willing to look honestly at themselves and do better, real change could happen. David pulled into his driveway where Rita was waiting on the front porch. She waved as he got out of the car. "You look different," she said as he climbed the steps. "Lighter somehow." "I feel lighter," he admitted. "I think we're actually doing it, actually making a difference." "I never doubted you would," Rita said, taking his hand. "That's why you bought the place, remember? Not for the profit. For the purpose." David squeezed her hand and looked up at the evening sky. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably having dinner with his wife, talking about his day at the nonprofit. Jennifer was probably reviewing sales strategies for the week ahead. Patricia was home with her family, proud of the work she did. And somewhere, someone was going to bed tonight feeling respected and valued because of how they were treated at a car dealership. That might seem like a small thing to most people, but to that person and to David it meant everything. The work would continue tomorrow. But tonight, David allowed himself to feel what he'd accomplished. Not just owning a business, but changing it. Not just making money, but making a difference. That was worth more than any profit margin could ever measure.